Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Watch Your Heroes Fall. This will be part 24, chapter 27, entitled Phase 3, Step 6, Feeling It. After depositing what was apparently the head of the Shiya Hisaikai on Aizawa's proverbial doorstep, the League is completely ready to collapse into a bed for as long as they can get away with. Kurogiri has already been warping Eri and those two injured to stand, Compass and Tomura and Hitoshi, to various booths in the bar. When the group dropping off the Shiya Hisaikai comes back through, Kurogiri warps them back to the bar too, and then everyone just kind of flops down. "I'm fine," Momo sings, still laughing. "I'm just a little dizzy." Hitoshi groans. "Momo, please, stop running around. The noise is making my head pound." "And you're going to make your injuries worse," Shoto says. Honestly, Shoto's not so bothered by Momo's lack of inhibition. It's nice to see someone so carefree, even if she'll hate herself for how her legs are stretching their road rash lacerations with the movement. Dabi's laughing too, keeping Eri entertained with funny faces and stupid baby jokes. "What do you call a crocodile who's been gone a long time?" "I don't know." "Todoroki Toya." "I don't get it." Tough crowd. He's a natural with toddlers. Shoto doesn't remember Toya ever being so gentle or kind with him. Different circumstances, he supposes. Everyone other than Momo and Dabi is grumbling and groaning. Everyone's got road rash and some smaller cuts and bruises. Plus, everyone but Kurogiri, Tomura, and Compass have giant, bone-deep bruises from Rappa. Himiko is trying to be excited with Momo, but the cuts and burns on her leg, the deep bruises on her shoulders and arms from Rappa, and the disappointment of not getting to see Ochako have drained her energy. And so she's mostly just shouting the occasional encouragement from her spot on the floor. Hitoshi is less injured than everyone else, but he's got what's shaping up to look like a moderate concussion, and keeps complaining about the noise. Dabi has been instructed to have Eri help him check on Hitoshi's consciousness every 15 minutes. Dabi is a mess, though weaker of magne stitches from his fight against Mirko or torn, and his shoulders dislocated. There's 4 pen-sized gashes on his left arm. He's got a black eye, and his nose looks broken, and his fingers are bloody, and everyone is kind of praying. Those aren't broken too. He's up next for treatment after Compass. Compass is barely lucid, even if Kurogiri protected him from Rappa. That guy with the big mouth really got its teeth in, and Kurogiri focused on absolutely dousing that with hydrogen peroxide before he even tried to treat it. Compass has always been pretty cavalier about his injuries, but now he's gritting his teeth and holding back moans and maybe tears. That could be the concussion, though, even if it's not as bad as Hitoshi's. Jean's got Tomura's head in his lap, because Tomura's in worse shape than almost anyone, but Jean's not a pretty sight either. He's got a long cut over the bottom half of his face, and his arms are in shreds too. Jean says it's all surface level, and it don't hurt much. Tomura's gonna need to be mummified or something. The road rash from where he skidded across the pavement is pervasive, ripping right through his outfit, and the fabric burn is just as bad as the road rash where the clothes didn't tear. He's spitting blood, but Kurogiri already checked, and that's from biting his cheek. His ribs are a mess of bruising and fractures, though. Magne's doing all right. She's just pissed that Rappa got her face with one hit, and it's bruising too thick for makeup to cover, so she can't do her show tomorrow night. Shoto tells her at least she doesn't have any broken bones. Rappa fractured Shoto's arm somewhere. They don't have an x-ray or anything, but Shoto's had fractures before. He knows what it feels like. He's tempted to ask Momo for some ace bandaging before she crashes from whatever high that quirk gave her to try bandaging it himself, but he'd have to do it with his left hand. And he'd have to stand up to get her attention, probably, since she's running around like a maniac, and he's not in the mood to aggravate his road rash, thank you very much. Izuku is passed out on the floor next to Shoto. He can be woken up, Shoto and Dabi and Eri checked, and doesn't appear concussed, so they're letting him sleep. But since he's asleep and can't tell Kurogiri how bad it is, Kurogiri asked Shoto to check. And when Shoto peeked under his clothes, nothing was broken or deeply cut, but there were layers and layers of bruises and cuts all kinds of ages. Some were new, from the fight with the Shiya Hisaikai, but some were older, from fights nobody in the League could guess at. And Izuku's covered in these little, accumulated patchwork injuries. He's got one gash in the side that's been bandaged, but nobody in the League did the bandaging. They worry about that. They hope he did it himself. Kurogiri finishes bandaging Compass's arm and moves on to Dabi to set his shoulder. Dabi smiles at Eri. "All right, kiddo ditto. You're off to say hi to someone else while Daddy Kurogiri fixes me up." "Is Kurogiri your dad?" Eri asks. "No, but fuck do I wish. Now go say hi to Magne." Who is Magne? Eri asks. That's me, dear, Magne says, beckoning Eri over to her booth. Dabi nods a thank you and bites his tongue while Kurogiri pops his shoulder back in. You've got stuff in your hair, Eri tells Magne. Magne laughs. Holy shit, did my curlers stay in for that whole fight? Jean tells her. About half of them did, yeah. Well, apparently they're battle-tested now, Magne says. Too bad it's for nothing. I can't do my show with a bruise this big on my forehead. You could style your hair over it, Jean suggests. Eri asks, What's a show? I'm a performer, kid, Magne says. I do my makeup all pretty and put on a cute outfit and dance a little bit and sing sometimes. What's makeup? Eri asks. We should do our makeup, Momo cries, swinging past them, still wound up. Magne makes a face. Momo, why don't you come sit with us for a minute? Okay, Momo sings and slides into the booth across from Magne and Eri. I'm kinda tired now. I bet you are, Jean laughs. Momo passes out about 32 seconds later, pillowing her head on her arms on the table at the booth. Across the bar, Kurogiri commends Dabi for only breaking one finger while he wraps it. Dabi's arm is already in a sling, and his nose has a bandage on it too. Kurogiri moves on to repairing the stitches, even though Dabi moans that it's not worth it. His skin will just tear open again. Kurogiri tells him that it won't tear if he lets it heal completely. Eri stares at everyone a lot. First Momo, who had been so animated and is now fast asleep. Then Magne, who is visibly exhausted but is still trying to extricate the curlers from her hair. Then Jean, who hasn't taken his mask off and is running his fingers through Tomura's hair the way you might with a child. Then Tomura, who is breathing funny and still bleeding in a couple places. Then Shoto, who is watching Dabi get stitched up and holding his arm close to him. Then Himiko, who's trying to hike up her skirts so she doesn't get any more blood or dirt on them from her leg. Then Compass, who is passed out on the floor, all of his arm and torso covered in bandages. Then Izuku, who was also passed out on the floor, but bleeding less. Then Hitoshi, eyes shut tight in his booth. Eri thinks she should check on his cushion. She's not sure what that means, but she knows that she needs to wake him up every 15 minutes, and she thinks it might have been 15 minutes now. Magne, Eri asks, and Magne looks down. Can I go wake up Toshi? Eri knows she didn't get the name right. She tries again. Toshi. Can I go check on his cushion? Magne pulls a wide-eyed face, tries not to, and then laughs anyway. Jean laughs too. Eri isn't sure why. Magne nods. Go for it, little tyke. Make sure he can tell you how old he is and where we are. Eri nods, ultra serious, and jumps down from the booth. She passes Himiko's booth first, and Himiko gives her a wide smile, despite the blood, and Eri tries to smile back. She likes Himiko. And then Eri gets to Hitoshi's booth and taps his foot. Nothing. Toshi, she says, and then he blinks blearily awake. Huh? He mumbles. Oh, hey, kid. What's up? What's your name? Eri asks. And where are we? You just said my name. It's Hitoshi. And we're at the bar. I'm not losing my marbles, Eri, I promise. You promise? Eri repeats. Yep. Pinky swear. What's a pinky swear? It means if I'm lying, you can cut off my pinky. Eri's eyes well with tears. I don't want to cut off your pinky, she whispers, her face wet and red. Oh, shit, fuck, goddammit, Dabi. Getting stitched up, what do you need? I made her cry, Hitoshi says nervously, but at least he's fully awake now. Himiko hefts herself out of her booth and sits on the floor next to Eri. Why are you crying? She asks. Eri wails. I don't want to cut Toshi's finger off. Himiko laughs, that loud and clear sound that surprises Eri enough to pause her sobs with hiccups. We're not cutting Hitoshi's finger off, Eri, Himiko says. People just say that. It's weird. I don't get it either. It just means he's, super serious about what he's saying. Really? We don't have to cut his finger off? Nope. Magne, who had been distracted chatting with Jean, calls over. Everything all right? From across the bar, and everyone assures her everything is fine. You should not be good with kids, Hitoshi says to Himiko, who is just now done tying up Eri's hair in a scrunchie from Momo with more skill than anyone expected. No offense, but you are the literal last person I would ever trust with a child. Himiko sticks her tongue out at him. I've got 2 younger sisters, stinky man. I'm better with kids than you'll ever be. Ha ha, I have an ever-rotating system of at least 4 at a time, Hitoshi counters, sticking his spoon into cereal that hasn't yet become soggy enough to entice him. Beat that. Why rotating? Eri asks. Don't they get dizzy? No, he means rotating like switching, little dove, Momo says. It's because they're always getting moved around between houses. Eri wrinkles her nose distastefully, and Hitoshi laughs, not mocking as much as acknowledging. Hitoshi would take a bullet for his current set of little siblings, but only a fool would think he enjoys where he lives. Momo is finally slowing down by her 3rd muffin. They hadn't been able to get any food in her yesterday. After everything, she just passed out and wouldn't wake up enough to eat. Now she's ravenous. Kurogiri is making her, and everyone else, eggs. He says the high protein count will be good for them. Eri is watching her eat, and Momo's still the perfect image of a dainty young lady even as she eats a muffin with near-killing intent. Eri is trying to copy, with her muffin, the way Momo holds her hands. Izuku leans over with a wet napkin to interrupt Eri's muffin-holding practice and wipe a smudge of blueberry and muffin crumbs from Eri's chin. Do you like the muffin? He asks. His voice is as close to the kid he had been 2 months ago than it has ever been, it seems, to the rest of the league. Eri nods. When Shoto smiles at her, around Izuku's shoulder, she smiles back. The smiles seem magical and precious, something rare enough that they should be kept safe in a warm windowsill or tucked beneath a pillow. Muffins are my new favorite, Eri says. She has said that about every food she has tried so far, which includes last night's salmon and rice onigiri, and several snacks ranging from chips to carrot sticks and now the muffins. Momo, who is still far too exhausted from yesterday to do much other than eat her muffins and, before that, sleep, smiles at Eri. If Momo were less exhausted, she would be mothering and hovering over Eri with every molecule in her body, but Eri is covered from all sides at the moment anyway, so Momo can wait until she's less hungry. When Jean makes his way downstairs, just as Kurogiri is plating a heaping portion of eggs for Momo and a sizable portion for everyone else, he takes in the scene, grins under the mask, and lets a tick sizzle out of his fingertips. They're still not up, he asks, and Kurogiri and Izuku both shake their heads. Dabi's awake, Shoto says. Just not up. We're letting Compass and Tomura wake up whenever they want to, Izuku says. This next part of the plan doesn't involve them anyway. Hitoshi groans and holds his head. Izuku laughs and says, Don't worry, it doesn't involve you either, Hitoshi. I'm literally worried about the opposite, Hitoshi grumbles. Concussion or no concussion, if you're doing some dumb shit, I'm going with you. That goes for all of us, I believe, Kurogiri says. Shoto's fingers tighten around Izuku's wrist, and Momo and Jean and Himiko all nod. Izuku looks like he might cry, for just a second, but he takes a deep breath. He blinks it back, he says, No, this part in particular has to be solo. Jean starts to say something, but Magne is making her way down the stairs behind him, yawning and stretching her arms over her head. What's got to be solo? She asks. How's your forehead? Izuku asks. It's clearly a deflection, and everyone frowns at it, but Izuku has his reasons and they all know it. And Eri's forehead was starting to crinkle with secondhand worry, so they all let it pass and promise themselves individually that they'll worm it out of Izuku some other time. Well, the swelling has gone down some, but there ain't no wig or hairdo that could cover that much. She points dramatically to her bruise, which is black and purple and definitely not yet at a stage where it can be covered with makeup, even makeup as expert as Magne's. She drops some of the performance to say, I checked on our 3 invalids on the way down. Dabi saying he's fine, which means I'm going to bring him a glass of water and some Motrin. Tomura's still asleep, so I'll leave him be. Compass is starting to wake up, so I'm going to check under those bandages for infection. What's an infection? Eri asks. That's when you get hurt and germs get in there, so it takes longer to heal, Momo, who has already finished her eggs, explains. Jean says, I'll check Compass if you deal with Dabi. Magne makes a face. I was hoping someone else would volunteer for that little menace. To the kids, she says, Dabi is the worst patient in the world. His arm could be coming off, and he'll tell you he'd rather lose it than you give him a sling. I'll give him the water and Motrin, Shoto offers. Will you really? Magne says. Your arm isn't giving you problems, is it? Shoto shakes his head. That it's not, and Magne gives him a glare. Izuku laughs. It's really not, he says. If his arm were bugging him, he'd have his shoulders all hunched, and he'd be frowning. He's always frowning, kinda, Himiko says, and Eri nods with her. My face is always neutral, Shoto defends. very different. Eri wants to go with Shoto to check on Dabi, so he huffs her up like a potato sack with his good arm until Momo wraps him on the arm with her knuckle and instructs him on how to properly hold a child, even with just one arm, and the two of them head upstairs. "I'm sorry you didn't get to see Ochako yesterday," Izuku says to Himiko. "I didn't think Mr. Aizawa would leverage it to get us to wait for the cops." "It's okay," Himiko sighs. "But I want to see her. I want to hold her and stab her." "Those are two very different things," Jean laughs, and then heads up the stairs with a collection of bandages and rubbing alcohol and ointment. Himiko rolls her eyes dramatically at him, and he laughs harder as he goes, and she says, "Well, how else do I get her blood? I want Otako to be with me all the time." "Still very different things you're talking about," Magne says with a fond little smile. Himiko's annoyed face goes into the start of an angry pout. Momo frowns a little too, just a confused, perfunctory kind of frown. "Do you want to be near her, or do you want her blood?" Himiko can't be too mad at Momo. Momo made the pink, frilly night dress Himiko was wearing after all, so she digs in her brain for an answer, but she can't find one, so she groans and lays down on the floor with a huff. "I don't know. They're the same thing. I want to be with her all the time, but she can't be with me all the time, so if I get her blood, then she's with me all the time even when she's not." Hitoshi asks, around a bite of eggs. "Why not just, ask for some blood?" Himiko sits up. She squints at Hitoshi. She frowns, squints harder, and says, "What do you mean?" "Literally just ask Ochako, can I please have some blood because I want to be around you more. Like that. Or better yet, just tell her you want to be around her more," Hitoshi says. "What if she says no?" Himiko asks. "Then you've got an answer and you move on," Magne says. Kurogiri chips in. "It usually is received more favorably to ask permission before crossing a boundary. Someone is more likely to enjoy your company if you respect their decisions." Himiko considers this, balling her fists in the night dress and poking at the bandages covering the gash on her leg. "But what about Sue?" she eventually murmurs. Izuku nods sagely. "They are dating already, and they make each other happy." "I want to make them both happy," Himiko says. Her eyes are wide and bright. She looks like she might cry. "I want to be around them both so much. But if I have to ask them, then what if Ochako says no and Sue says yes? What if Sue says no and Ochako says yes? I like them both. What do I do about that?" Momo grins. She scoots out of her bar stool and kneels on the floor next to Himiko. "Then you ask them both." Momo knows things that nobody else knows. She knows how Sue brings up Himiko's acrobatic combat even when it's not strictly relevant to class. She knows how Ochako talks about how Himiko called both of them by their first names right from the start. Yes, Ochako and Sue 2 months ago would never have dreamed of Himiko in any light but that which glints off of the blade of a knife. But now Himiko has been taught to ask. Eri likes being held by Shoto. Even if he's only using one arm, the arm she's being held by is warm and comfy. Shoto walks evenly and slowly, always careful not to go so fast that Eri is off balance. She has never been held so carefully. She likes it. She likes Shoto. She decides Shoto is her favorite, along with Izuku and Himiko and Compass and Jean and Dabi and Momo and Kurogiri and Hitoshi and Magne and Tomura. Shoto holds her carefully up both flights of stairs and then down the hallway, and then they knock on Dabi's door together. They enter even though Dabi says, "I'm not decent." And when they come in, they find Dabi pulling at the stitches Kurogiri redid on his wrist last night. "Stop that," Shoto says. He looks at Eri, and she can tell that he's asking if it's okay to put her down, even though he didn't say that. She couldn't tell you how she can tell. She nods and wriggles her feet, and he sets her down so gently that the floor-length pajama dress Momo made her doesn't even stir. Eri hugs his leg, because she's only 6 and doesn't know how else to tell Shoto that he is her new favorite, along with Izuku and Himiko and Compass and Jean and Dabi and Momo and Kurogiri and Hitoshi and Magne and Tomura. Dabi gives her a toothy smile. His nose is still bleeding a little, so Eri takes one of the rags Shoto brought up in his sling and pokes Dabi's face with it. "I've got it from here, little one," Dabi says, and takes the rag from her and stuffs it in his nose. Eri giggles when he makes a face. Shoto kneels down next to her, starts pulling some more napkins, a water bottle, and a pill bottle from his sling. "Don't shove it in like that, you'll make it worse," he says, and Dabi rolls his eyes but takes it out and holds it there instead. Eri watches as Shoto tries to open the water bottle with one hand, and then Dabi tries to take it, and Shoto says he'll pop the stitches in his wrist again. So Eri says, "I can do it." And she takes the water bottle. Only thing is, she's not very strong, so it takes all of her strength to unscrew the cap from the bottle, and then she hands that to Dabi, who ruffles her hair and takes a gulp. Then the pill bottle, but Shoto says Eri can't do that one, so instead she holds the bottle in place while Shoto uses a funny motion to get the top off. Shoto gives Dabi 2 little blue tablets, and Dabi drinks them. "Are you hungry?" Eri asks Dabi. "We have blueberry muffins. They're my new favorite." "I thought the carrots were your favorite," Dabi says, smirking. "I can have more than one favorite," Eri tells him. He's an adult, she thinks. He should know this. Dabi laughs like he did know it, and says he'd love a muffin, but he'll come down to get it. She says okay, and then Shoto and Dabi look at each other in ways that say things that Eri can't hear. She sits patiently and ties little knots in the hem of her pajama dress and waits for them to be done. When they are, Dabi just says, "Thank you." And Shoto just says, "Sure." They sound happy. Eri's cheeks hurt from smiling so much today. Nobody expects Tomura to come downstairs at all that day. They've been checking on him in shifts, so if he ever woke up there would be someone with him, but it happens to strike when they've all decided after 36 hours of doing that, okay, we should all sit down and relax and maybe eat some dinner, even though it's almost 10 p.m. Tomura, the only one left unconscious since Compass woke up in the early evening, ambles down into the bar, and Hitoshi sees him first and doesn't even bother saying anything, just stands up and runs over and wraps Shigaraki Tomura, former head of the League of Villains, in a hug. "Ow," Tomura cries, and Hitoshi lets go. "You saved my life," Hitoshi says. "I had to give you a hug, I think that's a rule." Tomura doesn't know that Hitoshi isn't a hugger, but the hug means an incredible amount to both of them either way. "It is," Shoto and Jean both say, both teasing, but very differently. Everyone laughs at the difference. "Yeah, well, shut the fuck up," Tomura says. "You don't owe me shit, and I don't owe you shit." Then Tomura sighs to his seat in a booth and looks across from him, and there's Eri, sitting next to Izuku, staring at him. Tomura looks to Izuku, then to Eri, then to Hitoshi, then back to Eri. "Why do we still have a toddler?" he asks. "My name is Eri," Eri says. Tomura stares. "My name is Shigaraki," he says to her, then to the rest of the bar. "Why do we still have a toddler?" "Well, I don't know," Izuku cries. "Where are we going to put her?" "I like it here," Eri says. She's smiling a little tiny smile. Tomura shouts, "We are villains, executing an apparently very careful plan. But now we're executing a plan so technical that the time of day is important, and we're babysitting." "Tomura, calm yourself," Kurogiri says. "You're still injured." "We need to do something about this kid," Tomura says. "What if she gets injured, or arrested, kidnapped?" "Aw, are you worried?" Himiko says. Trust Himiko to say that without an ounce of mocking in her voice. "I'm not worried. She's a nuisance." "Don't mind him, Eri," Izuku says. "He's just worried about you." Eri nods sagely and sips on her juice pouch, her new favorite food, even though Momo was adamant that it is not a food. "What about your infallible plan, then?" Tomura says, voice actually cracking, like the 20-year-old he is. It makes the mocking jab show what it is. Fear. Izuku considers this. The fear, the mocking, the plan. His face furrows. "You're right," he says. Which is not what Tomura wanted to hear. Tomura wanted someone to reassure him that the toddler would be fine and taken care of, that the end of the plan was near anyway, that she could stay. Tomura isn't sure why that's what he wanted. But Izuku has spoken, and now the ball is rolling down the hill very quickly. "She can't stay. It's better she stays with a hero or someone until this is all over. I'm sorry, Eri," he murmurs to her when she starts to cry. "It's not forever, just for a little while until we're all done here." "But I don't want to go see someone else," Eri sniffles. "Why not drop her off with your mom?" Compass suggests. "Or someone's mom," Magne adds. "Our mom is in the hospital," Shoto says. Dabi nods and adds, "Yeah, she wouldn't be a great option for a traumatized 6-year-old. It's halfway joking. "You do not want to stick her in with my foster family," Hitoshi says. "They'd lose her in a day, if they didn't throw her into a group home or something first." "My parents might," Momo starts. Izuku interrupts. "We can't leave her with parents. How are they supposed to explain where she came from without getting mixed up in this? Mr. Aizawa seems to be keeping the incident with the Shihisaikai quiet for us for now, but I can't imagine that will work forever, and then... He sighs, looking exhausted. No parents, he says finally. What about Eraserhead? Jean says. He seems to take pretty good care of his kids. Kurogiri gets a strange look on his face, just a little squinting of his glowing yellow eyes, but nobody knows how to read that. Yes, he says slowly. He would take good care of her. It doesn't sound like his usual tone of voice either. Nobody really knows what to do with that, so they press on with the conversation. Sorry to ask again, Kurogiri, but could you warp us to his office? Izuku asks. Kurogiri startles. He startles, like a normal person instead of a sentient, babysitting droid. He composes himself and nods. The warp opens to Aizawa Shota's office, but when Izuku knocks, nobody is there. They try the same thing at his room, at the school dorms, and get the same result. Himiko pulls Izuku back out of the warp. Izuku, she says, grinning wide. How about Ochako? All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 27 of Watch Your Heroes Fall. Chapter 28 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one, and as always, thank you so much for listening.